Hi, welcome to another discussion of Warhost of Vastmark by Janny Wurts. It's the third book of the Wars of Light and Shadow series. We're reading 3 chapters every 2 weeks. This is the second discussion, so we're discussing chapters 4 to 6. I have some wonderful people with me. My name is Varsha, by the way. Sorry, I should probably say that because we're posting this on multiple channels. But Chibipo, would you like to kick us off with introductions?
Of course. Chibi Po. I'm a long-time reader. I feel like I'm repeating the same thing every time, but yeah. So happy to be here. Jared.
I'm Jared. I'm at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and this is my first time through Janny Wurts' works and enjoying them immensely.
Yes, I'm Steve from Steve Talks Books, and it's my first time reading the series, and grateful to have all of you to discuss it with every so often when I can make it. But back on track. I fell behind, but I am just about caught up, so we're good.
Yeah, great to have you back, Steve. My name's Chris Mohan. I'm from the imaginatively titled channel Chris Mohan, and this is my first time reading these stories as well, and enjoying it very much. So I'm glad to be back as a 5 for sure.
Yeah, do we want to start with chapter 5, where I think Arathon abducts Talit? That happens in this, right? It wasn't in last week's discussion.
It's chapter 4, I think it is.
Yeah. So he abducts Talit, and I know a lot more happens. I think we're back to the Vastmark towns, but this time with Kaol, training the archers. I think we also hadn't. Dakar also figures out that Arathon, why Arathon was working with the shepherds in those cities. Yeah, all of that happens in this chapter. So what did you guys think? It's a lot of action, I think, building up to a big ending.
Yeah. But so chapter 4 starts off with Arathon. He's kind of saying goodbye to the mountain people he was staying with.
Yeah,
that's right.
And of course, as always, and he's embarking on like a life of piracy, basically,
Yeah.
right? And of course, Dakar is gloomily in tow with, he doesn't like being with him. So,
Yeah.
and then he finds out that Janessa's children had stowed away. They just kind of pop up and say, like, "Where? Hello." Thought that was kind of amusing, actually.
Yeah.
And I discovered a word I never heard before. The word brigantine for a boat. I had to look that up. That was new to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that before, but
I've seen it around. I don't know if I know specifically what it means. I thought it's something like a warship. It's a specific type of boat, right?
yeah. And I had just never heard that term for a boat before, so that was I love learning new stuff like that. So that was just like, great, because I like to look up stuff that I don't know about.
Yeah, I had seen the word before, but yeah, I'm looking it up now, and it's a 2-masted sailing vessel, so it's not a warship like I thought it was. I don't know why I thought it was a warship. Maybe I came across it in Temeraire or something like that and just assumed it meant warship.
I feel like these chapters. I remember the last discussion, man, being sort of frustrated. Why has Dakar not sort of worked some of this stuff out for himself? Well, how, a lot of those things that we're sort of getting frustrated at, we got some resolution to here.
Yeah.
And even at the point when Arathon, I mean, that wonderful line, he says, "Oh, we need more money, and how are we going to do it? We're going to get it from Lysair." he's going to pay for his own war. Just thought this is fun at this stage. And even when he decides to kidnap Talith, I'd sort of worked out what was going to happen the whole way along. If you know what I mean. After that, when she tried to escape and knew what was going on there, you know, the resolution of that. I didn't figure for him stealing the money twice, which was
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of amazing.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And it's the kind of brazen nature of Arathon, where he's sort of treading this really fine line between, you know, being justified in what he's doing, but also, you know, being a bit
Mm,
cheeky about it.
He is, yeah.
Mhm.
He is
Yeah.
cheeky about it.
it's
Um,
and sorry,
Oh,
go
no,
ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say the oath he gave to Asandir about surviving at all costs. That's giving him a bit of a free pass, it seems like.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I remember thinking that. It's like the sorcerers are kind of confronting him about some of the piracy and stuff like that, and he tells them, he's like, no, this is what I got to do to survive according to my oath to you guys,
Yeah.
and you got to live with it, you know.
Yeah. Like, Asandir immediately backs off and says, "Yeah, go on. What do you mean?"
Yeah.
Steve, were you gonna say something?
No, I was just laughing about.
Okay.
He's
No, what I
very-
was going to say was the brigantine, and you know, somewhere around the Mediterranean in the 13th century, you know, would have been considered a warship because of how fast it, you know, its speed and maneuverability. So, you know, and a lot of pirates made use of them too.
I see.
Oh, pirate. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it had the sails, but also looks like it would also have set up for rowing. So, you know, it's like it could run you down really quickly.
Mm. Yeah.
Which, well, that's what he does. It's like all of a sudden, you know, that little merchant brig, and all of a sudden, this ship's just coming down on them out of nowhere, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, we're done."
Oh yeah, I thought the thing he did for stealing the first round of gold was brilliant with the with the boat just like hanging out there for them to tow.
But not just any boat, the Royal Freedom. Like actually, the boat that she used to try and escape on is the boat. Like it's just so
Oh
perfect.
yeah. I have figured that one of the people that is helping Talith escape was maybe Arathon in disguise. But then immediately the next scene over, we went to Arathon in the Vastmark area. And then I was trying to figure out, there's no way that she escaped. And Arathon doesn't know about it or didn't organize it. So I was like, okay, how does this play out?
Yeah, I think I had exactly the same thought, Farsha, that he was going to be one of the people. But then the more I thought it, I thought he has to not be involved with her captivity at all for her to ultimately believe in the justness of his cause, if you know, or justness of his fight. You know, if it's nearly exactly the conversation that she has with Lysair at the end of 6. To say he never laid a hand on me. He was not involved. But I couldn't shut off my own ears and what I seen and what I heard.
Yeah.
This is the truth that I see. That was not influenced, and if he had been on the boat, then it would have tainted that a little bit. If you know what I mean, I think I sort of thought that up myself, but I was very sure that her escape was planned.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. It's nice when you know ahead or sort of can guess that something is the case, but you're still curious about how it plays out. That kept me really interested.
So you probably saw my post on the you know, page chewing, where I was like, yeah, I know I'm turning in my, you know, reader cred. So who caught this? Because I just realized this today, and I felt really stupid because that I never connected these two things. So after he, you know, abducts her and they're headed back, you know, and the, you know, her handmaiden had been, you know, whining to him and all, and you know, she's like putting up, pretending to be a invalid and whatnot, right? And you know, then there's that little exchange there that Dakar has with him, you know, where Dakar is, you know, like, you're a miserable human, you know, bastard and all that, right? You know, typical Dakar stuff at this point. And you know, Arathon's like, indeed, only the cook doesn't think so. And I did not piece this together with a later conversation until today. You know, which is why I felt really stupid. Because, like I said, this book came out, a while ago. So that, and I'm like, why did it not connect this? But that was him giving a Dakar a hint to figure it out for himself. That everyone had been taken in by her, oh, I'm an invalid, blah 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 blah. The ship's making me seasick, except she's not.
Right.
Because when he calls her out later about how it's like, yeah, my cook assures me that you've had an amazing appetite for somebody who's sick.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, how did I miss that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm stupid. I give up. I'm done.
Well,
So did anybody else catch that? When they're reading the connecting bits there, because I felt really stupid.
Honestly, I feel like you're really smart for catching that, because I don't think I would have made the connection. Maybe on a reread, but perhaps not even then. Yeah.
Well, I felt especially stupid because I was chatting with Jenny, and she made a remark about the invalid thing, and that was when it clicked, and I was like, oh my god, how did I miss that? And so I felt especially bad because she basically pointed it out to me, and then I was like, how many times have I read this book?
Yeah, but that is a really clever connection between the two. I like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of
I
great
really
dialogue
liked
between them.
his, Aerithon's insight into people being, and he's just not pulling any punches, through these couple chapters. Just first when he rips into her about how stupid she was to, take off on a little ship and, for the worse, with no defenses and all. And then when he drops all those bombs on Janess, about, and she's like, he's nothing like, Lysander, who's all forthright and everything. And then she's like, and then Aerithon's like, yeah, a brother can love, so can he hate. Lysander will, do whatever, use whatever's at hand. But you're not going to find me running around in the public eye for a big army.
Yeah, he really was like laying down the law and like becoming quite the harsh taskmaster and with some of the workers and stuff like that. And he was
this one was my, mentioned it before, it's my favorite bit of dialogue where to Talith, where he's like, don't mistake me for your husband. I've never loved weakness. It can be nurtured to dependency. And he just shuts her up right there. And she's like, ouch. Yeah. It's like, truth hurts, huh?
Yeah. I thought that tied really well with what Dakar realizes later on, that everyone who follows Lysander, it's because they are, I'm really paraphrasing here, but filling some sort of hole with their worship of him. But everyone who follows Arathon is following him independently and of their own will. So I thought that those two statements about Lysander connected really well.
Yeah, I think it wasn't it. Talon says the people that you're hunting are tradesmen and farmers and deckhands and things. These people are not a threat to the existence. You're fighting your own war, if you know what I mean, in your conquest of this man.
Yeah.
And anything she says is just almost in one ear and out the other.
That's right.
Him.
Yeah. Jared, you were saying something? Sorry, go ahead, Chibico.
Nope.
Well, I was wondering because I kind of forget what was the reason why Talith actually took off on that foolish wandering that she did, just to join up with Lysander, or was there something else behind that?
I think it was outlined in the Caradmon, outlined it to him basically. The letters that she'd been exchanging with Lysander gave her the impression that it was all safe and everything was fine.
Right.
So she thought she'd be perfectly easy to go down there, but then her guards people were like, "Yeah, no, we're not gonna let you hair off like that." And she's like,
"Right,
watch me."
Yeah, it was cool though, because I thought that Arathon's conversations with Talith in the way that all worked out, it correlated with his conversations with Dakar, and how Dakar started having all these doubts and stuff about where he stood later on too, because he like Dakar was doing a lot of mental gymnastics to try to
the
you know
the healing scene from the first three,
yeah,
That's
and
that whole experience really did a number on Dakar.
it did, and you got a lot of good insight into Dakar's mindset and the struggle he's having, especially when I think he meets up with Lysaea later on,
That's right. Yeah.
and it isn't this nice reunion that he wanted, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
it sort of is. It's double sided. Like on the face of it, it appears that it is because Lysaea's you need drink. You'd be missing drink. You look like you fill your boots, but Dakar's troubled. Dakar is kind of seeing and feeling not quite right, especially when you couple it with his vision that he's had about a possible end to Arathon, and he's thinking this. I should be celebrating this. This should be a great thing that this battle will end, but he's troubled and he's
Yeah.
unsure of what way he sits.
Got doubts, and he's just like, how is he still friends with me? I've been doing this, and then he's got that doubt. He's like, is he wanting to get me drunk so that he can get me to talk?
Yeah.
Which we've seen with in Ships, I believe, where that was. I think it was in Ships where he actually does that to someone. Got them drunk to convince them to join his cause with whichever brother was Keldmar, one of the Sabrini brothers. And
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting how both Lysaea and Dakar opinion of Arathon is based mainly around one, what they see as a very truthful moment. Obviously Lysaea with the ships, when he's seen Arathon playing with the kids with ships and that kind of thing there, and everything that he based around is that one moment of deception means that everything else is true. Whereas Dakar, it's how he is with the shepherd's people when he brings back the child, and he says there's no way that was faked. That regardless of how manipulative he is and how much he's clever and kind of always has an answer in his way ahead of everybody else in that kind of sneaked way, there was truthfulness and his compassion there that I can't unsee. That then is the little seed, that single bit for both of them is the bit that all of their other experiences kind of get pushed on.
Yeah. Dakar didn't see anything from the war, right? So it's mostly Lysaea's. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's the single thing that they witness Arathon, and both with children.
That's right.
That change how they feel. Although, if like Lysaea twisted what he saw, possibly result of the mistrade. Dakar tried to twist what he saw and failed, or is failing, I suppose, at the moment. Yeah. There was something that I'm trying to remember what it is now. Oh, dang it, I forgot. I'll remember it later on. But there's something that Dakar thinks to himself that I thought was really interesting. But
Well, he has another vision, Dakar, and he was torn about that vision, but he didn't tell anybody about it.
Yep.
And then when he finally was like having all these doubts about this, his the curse and Arathon and Lysaea, and he knows that the curse is on Lysaea, but he's looking for a way for his salvation, and then he had the thought that he need only stand aside and let the arrow fly its course. And so I'm wondering if he's at that point going to stop trying to work against Arathon, and because he had this vision, and I'm not sure because that's kind of near the end of chapter 6.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what the future is going to hold as far as that goes.
Well, interestingly, it's not even enough for him to stand aside and let things take its course. If he is going to have to interfere, and in the opposite way than he's been trying to do for 3 books here, he's going to have to interject on behalf of Arathon to either stop the arrow at source or stand in front, whatever the thing is. He's the only person that knows about it at the moment. He didn't even share it with the other the rest of the fellowship.
Right.
And the occasions that he could do, because they know he's got foresight. They know that this is part of his gift, that he can do that. So he hasn't actually broached that yet, and that's 3 chapters left.
Yeah.
The next 3 chapters are a ride. Like the next one immediately after this, is you're gonna have some great stuff in it, and then we get into the whole thing in Vastmark. So
Okay. I think I might go read immediately after.
Yeah, this is why I'm like this the character work in this one, for Dakar is like so great, and you've still got more to come.
Okay. Yeah. I already I think the scene with Dakar on that ship with Lysair was maybe one of my favorites. Like I mean, there's a lot now, so I don't know if it even starts to mean anything now if I call something my favorite, but it is so beautifully written. I love that piece of introspection, and it's I think the first time ever that we've seen Dakar actively refuse drink, as in he is drinking. I was like, no, Dakar, don't drink yourself into a stupor again. But he pours away his glass because he is that's not doing anything for him. He has to face his demons this time. I love that scene.
So one scene that I wasn't sad at, which also highlights or actually 2 scenes, because first, when Caradmon shows up to let Lysair know about Talus abduction, and before he tells him, he asks him, well, your landing at Marior was restrained, right? And Lysair's like, for a village that, where Lysair basically outright says, he's like, yeah, but I would have been totally justified in just like slaughtering them all, which is the way he phrased it. He's like, yeah, I was restrained, even though they harbored a villain. And I'm like, wow, dude, okay.
Yeah.
But then we get the later scene at the exchange in Ostermere. And we find out what happened in that, following up that little snippet about Captain the Black Drake and Captain Durkin.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think that's especially interesting, Chibi, because you contrast that feeling of how Lysair treats people around the place, but again, the questioning that's made of Arathon about the archers that he's training at Vastmark, and about how he's bringing those people into a war that they don't necessarily need to be involved with, and his justification but he's also trying to enrich that land or trying to give them something back. He's paying them. He's trying to leave them. They're going to be involved in this war whether they would like it or not, but they're going to get something out of it. That's what the payment's all about. And actually, that contrast of both those their approaches, again, from Dakar's point of view and everybody else's point of view, they kind of seeing the 2 approaches to this war.
Yeah, where Dakar even remarks that, Arathon doesn't make any false promises that, this will end here.
Yeah.
I love how Dakar kept yelling out, you. Because he was providing a bunch of wood for the bows and stuff.
Just that little bit where they're like, yeah, no, we even though it was just we captured her and executed her because we wanted to hurt you. That was pretty much the only motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a shocker, because I was
like, whoa, dude!
I kind of wanted to see that character again at some point.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, Damn.
Yeah, it was. I think I was reading this yesterday, and when I finished the chapter, I was left feeling really low, and I think seeing this character killed off page was, I guess, a really powerful way to tell us just how cruel Lysair is, and he's yeah, and framing it in this aspect of Lysair is compelled by the Mistrate, but exactly how much though you want to kill Arathon, I get that, but now you're being told that you have this external compulsion to kill Arathon, and you're still willing to kill hundreds, thousands of people to get to him. Let's say you're still justified and the Mistrate is compelling you to do that, but what about the justification for all the innocent people you're killing, right? It that I think that's a really interesting way to frame it, because I wanted to think about separating the compulsion from what's can we forgive him if we understand that all of the killing is coming from the compulsion. Would we feel any more sympathetic towards Lysair? it f- it's easy to say, oh, he's not thinking too much, and this fellowship keeps saying he's being twisted by the Mistrate, his judgment is being twisted by the Mistrate, but to what extent? Right? Is everything he's doing a result of being twisted by the Mistrate? Because if not, if even a small percentage of that is of his own doing, then not he's no match to Arathon in that case.
Well, I think, and this goes back to Curse a little bit, but I think a good um, uh, insight into that is, two scenes from, Curse. One, when they're at the Earth right before they fall through the portal into Aethera, um, where all the shadows from the of the curse of Earth that makes Davian left behind or whatever, right? Those are all rampaging around, and are between them and the the gate to Aethera, and Lysair like desperate, like freaks out, and like Erethan, it's sort of an Erethan's perspective at that point, but he, like, as Erethan describes it, channeled the whole of his power through the of his light gift out, like basically a suicide attack almost. The Erethan had to use the shadows to temper. And that's as we know, pre-curse. That's well before he gets cursed by the Mist Wraith. But then we get to the battle in Strakewood, when Erethan and Lysair see each other, and we have that moment where Lysair like completely flips out and attempts the same thing. That last attack that Erethan stops, was meant to just basically a suicide attack, and he'd gotten strong enough with his gift now that it would have killed everyone. Like literally, Erethan could have, at least as he outlines it, could have just protected himself, and the forest would have burned. Everyone, else would have died, but Erethan could have just, stopped right there, kept himself alive, and but Lysair screams about, he's going to kill Erethan and doesn't care what the cost is. So I'm kind of like, there's an, it's so, yeah, the question of how much it controls him is like a big question mark, because it's clearly exploiting character flaws and things that he would do in desperation. So I'm like,
that's yeah, it's something I'd like to hear from Steve on, actually, because he's had a much longer form of this, and I think up until pretty much this point, but I think we started to get a kind of chapter 3 of this devolution of Lysair as a good person. There were sort of two good characters for a lot of the while that were kind of with the curse, but as you quite rightly pointed out, Chippy Poe, it's very clear that it's not just the curse at all times. It's there are character flaws that are within here, and because we're doing it 3 chapters at a time, it can be kind of tough to kind of go moment to moment. But you've kind of done like a lot of the end of ships, Steve, haven't you, into Vastmark here, and there's like a devolution there.
Yeah, I started getting that at the end of ships, because we had a few moments there of Lysair starting to see him in a different light. So you do see him kind of evolving in my mind and throughout this book. But interesting point about Rush you made about his character and whether or not that makes him more sympathetic, I think it does. I think it see him in a totally different way if he isn't in total control. But and I do like when characters die off screen. I have to say, it has your imagination going, and you start to wonder what happened. And I think it makes it more intriguing instead of everything you knowing every detail about someone's death. Not knowing makes it more interesting sometimes. And not, I mean, I don't want that all the time. Don't get me wrong, but occasionally in certain situations, when it's used correctly, it's very effective.
Yeah.
It's happened multiple times in this series, obviously, because Jarrett's dad died off screen, I think, as well. There was that whole thing about he knew he was going to die, and we didn't even spell out how he died and all that kind of stuff, but it was, again, really effective.
Yeah.
And Jarrett got married, right? As well.
Oh,
I
he
think off screen, yeah. They had that down, and it was in chapter 4.
I missed that. What?
Where
was it mentioned?
In chapter 4, but I'm not sure exactly where. But
was it in one of the little passages in the middle?
It might have been one of the little ones.
Okay.
I think it remarks that he's had his marriage, and then he's sending Cowell.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
to help Aerith.
Yeah, it's page 230 in the paperback version in Ring Ripples.
Yeah, right. So it's that was another like little off-screen thing that what it was an event, but it wasn't. I wonder if that's going to come into play later as well. I'm not sure, but he is a Duke now, so it matters.
But that's the kind of world building that I think is really interesting, because it shows that it's not just about these two characters. There's a world that's evolving and changing regardless of the events that are happening with these two people. People are getting married, having kids, and doing all that kind of stuff in the background. And that's where I think a lot of those little interjected pieces are really nice to kind of fill in. Right, we've concentrated on this small section of the world for the past while, but remember, there's other stuff.
Pretty large continent with a lot of people on
it.
But to follow on what Steve said with the off camera, with the implication, like from Deegan, that it's like, that Durkin was killed just to hurt Aerith in some way, and you don't know what they did, but it just sort of implies it's like, that probably was not a nice death.
Yeah. There was sorry, go ahead, Jared.
No, go ahead. No.
There was a line that I think Dakar and Talit are sort of thinking together, I guess, or there was a statement about that, and it was about whether Arathon's cruelty stems from, what is it? Oh, yeah, okay. Arathon's viciousness stemmed not from cruelty, but from too terrible a gift of compassion. Yeah, that was interesting, and that Dakar and Talit both realized that. I think, I like that one.
It's like Arathon's become one of my favorite characters of all time. He really has, and it's that kind of character building that makes it, that makes it that way for me.
So there's something that really confuses me actually about his relationship with the Fellowship. Given that if one of them dies, or the real threat isn't actually these two people, it's not really Arathon and Lysair, it's the Wraith and the Eric, taking over and becoming bigger in the world. Yet they're innocent bystanders too much of the time, if that makes sense. They do not want to get involved, they do not want to help, especially when one of them, like at the moment, it seems like Sethier is the only one that's really going. But there's only one of them being hunted. There's only one of them actually on the run here. Are the actions that you're seeing the result of somebody that's being hunted and you being harsh on them, or are you judging the man that's underneath? Like, nobody else wants to get involved. And like I say, only Sethier seems, even Asandir, although I think it's very much in his role to kind of not really get too involved in anything and always be a part. But you see conflict within the Fellowship between, like, Caramon's very much like damn to hell with them all, and Lehane's the same, and they're being very judgmental on something needs to be done about him, but they obviously can't lock him up. I mean, that was the kid, because then he's just going to be killed, So I think that's kind of this edge of innocent bystander. We can't interfere too much to be in. I think we need to.
But didn't Arathon kind of force their hand to get involved with the negotiating, with the whole stealing of the treasury and stuff like that? Because I don't know if the sorcerers really wanted to get involved, the Fellowship, but did he kind of force their hand to get involved there?
Yeah.
To some extent, because very much, they're supposed to be functioning as impartial, because, and we still got more to come, but their priorities are very much not, are very much more long term and not as concerned with, the short term impact of what these guys are doing. But yeah, and then what'll be interesting, of course, is how some factions interpret them. There at the Ostermere, it's like, no, we're here to enforce the peace. This will go smoothly, and there will be no conflict. We're completely neutral, but is everyone going to see it that way?
They were playing with fire a little bit, no? Because as they were setting the wards, they felt like there was a chance that it could go out of control. And we saw in the early chapters that they barely managed to contain the second incarnation of the Mistwraith. And it felt like they were letting too much get to chance, but maybe they knew what they were doing. Yeah, it was an interesting mix of like, are you sure you should be doing this? And also like they had fallbacks and getting people out of the way quickly and so on. So
and also and I think this was kind of highlighted in ships when Sandir showed up after the whole scene with J-Lot and J-Lot, and Azarathon asked them for help, like really asked them to intervene on his behalf against Lysair. The closest we get is where he kind of freaks out at the wharf there, but then he's just like, if you guys want, I'll leave, just to avoid the whole thing. So he doesn't really ask them for their intervention. He just sort of is like, should I leave? And they're like, no, you're fine. But then we also see when they're putting up their wards, like Varsha mentioned, that they're like, this curse thing is unnatural and wrong and weird, and we need to deal with this somehow.
Yeah. And it was also interesting that it gets stronger each time that they interact with each other, Arathon and Lysair, that the curse wrenches itself in deeper. That added dimension, I think, makes it very interesting for their next interaction.
I did have a question for all of you, because I know I'd fallen behind and I missed the last couple discussions, but I was wondering if you had discussed whether or not, for me, like when I came back to trying to catch up, I found myself it didn't take me as long to read as it did at the beginning of the first, even the second book. Did you all find that I wondered if it was me just adjusting to the prose and the style, or did the style change? Because it feels, before I had to really be engaged with it, and now I just feel myself moving really quickly through. Not quickly, but it seems like it flows much easier, I guess you can say.
I think you acclimate to it pretty quickly, So it's like as you read it, it's like you struggle a little with curse, and you get to ships, and it just starts to speed along, and then before you know it, you're just full speed ahead. At least that's what I'm seeing, not just with us here, but others where it's like they start reading and they're like, no, I can't stop, gotta keep going, and it's just like sucks you in.
Yeah,
I flew through these 3 chapters. I was just like, wow, it just flew by, and I don't know, maybe the neurons in our brains are rewiring to accept her language better, and we're reading it faster and better.
I don't know, maybe because of how I'm reading this kind of in between other books. I find there are times when I pick up the book and I'm like, I've read 3 pages and I'm like, I need to go away for I need to either clear my head for the other stuff and then come back at a later time, and then it does read really quickly. in parts, but it definitely is it's not the kind of thing that I can pick up with a lot of stuff going on in my head and read, because I need to be attuned to the language, and I need to be attuned to what's going on to really think about what's happening sentence by sentence and kind of pick it apart a little bit. So I do have those moments where I'm like, oh no, just I can't be watching the TV or have the TV on the background and doing this at the same time.
Yeah.
I need to be giving it attention.
Yeah, no TV.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Chris. This is not something that I can read at night, for instance, and it's not something that I can like randomly pick up, read 2 pages, and move on, and then come back and continue. Like I still have to be engaged with it, but in a good way, because I think there's a lot going on. It's not the writing style anymore. It's just things that I need to pay attention to. But also, I think there's a few other things that might be contributing to reading a little bit faster. I did notice that this feels easier to read, or that I'm going through it faster. Like whenever I sit down to read, I might be able to get through more pages than I might have with Curse. And I think I have a theory, I guess, or hypothesis, that it's about it's for a couple of different reasons. One, we are more familiar with these characters. Like I love all the pages on which Arathon has a presence, for instance. I really love reading those because I like Arathon as a character a lot. And also, I guess, a few others now, Dakar and Jines are very interesting to me. And I think Talith will become or is now interesting. So like there are more characters that I enjoy reading about. So I want to keep turning the page when I'm reading them. But also, I think there's a lot of fast-paced action in this book as compared to Curse or even the early parts of Ships. I think there was one chapter where Lysair's army is marching, and that just felt so slow. It read at such a plodding pace. But thinking about it, I think it was deliberate, because it really makes you feel what the army is feeling with the pace at which they're moving and what they might be going through. So I think some of the pacing or how it's feeling is probably deliberate, that we're slowing down or reading slowly in certain sections because of the action being slow, or there being no action. It's just like sort of plodding and getting through what the characters are going through. But in these chapters, just a lot has happened and there's a lot of action, so it's also reading more fast. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and familiarity with the characters also
Yeah.
allows a little bit better, because you don't have to wonder who's this person. You already know, so you can just
exactly
just keep going. Even the sorcerers now, I'm getting more used to them. Whereas in Curse, it's like, who's this sorcerer guy? But now it's like I'm getting to know them better, and so you can just keep going.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously there's a lot of nuance in the language. It's not just you're reading for events. You're reading for subtext. You're reading for the interrelationships and the thoughts that people have when they're not speaking and all that kind of stuff. But like, you can look at this on the outside and go, we read 3 chapters every 2 weeks, and people go, geez, that's so slow. But actually, those 3 chapters probably take me about 3 It's about 3.5 hours, I think, to read the 3 chapters, something like that.
Oh yeah.
For me, yeah, they're meaty. They're not like 3 chapters of something else where you kind of go, I'll pick something up to fall asleep while reading, that kind of thing. There's really something tangible to get into.
I think when I open each chapter, I think like my Kindle tells me like 1 hour and 10 minutes. but when I really sit down and figure out that it takes me about an hour and a half, 2 hours for each chapter. I mean, but it's not. It doesn't. I'm a slow reader anyway, but I think this is a perfect pace. I don't know that I'd get as much out of it if we were reading more, because it does take a lot of brain power. I mean, for me, I'm not very smart anyway, but it does take a lot of brain power to kind of keep up with it, and kind of, because there's so many lines that I'll just sit there and reread over and over again, just because it's like, wow, that's awesome. I just want to keep reading it and write it down. And so yeah, I think it takes me a good 5 or 6 hours to read 3 chapters.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I gotta stop and underline things.
Writing in the book, what?
No.
Oh yeah, I am.
What?
Please tell us.
I highlight.
I don't think I can do this anymore.
Are the spines intact, Jared? Are the spines intact?
Yeah, they are actually.
Okay. Okay.
Those
All
are
right.
fine.
Well, there's hope.
You can underline as long as you keep the spines in.
I'll never say a bad word about Robin ever again. All she does is break spines. No right. Oh god, my
I
heart
think
broke.
for me it's like it's kind of variable because like other books I'm reading, I just finished one today that I started on the 31st, and that was a 700 pager, and I did that in a week. Just but it got into it, and I'm like, okay, I really like the way it's written, and it just sort of like, I don't want to deride it. I'm not saying it's a negative way, but it kind of felt, um, it's sort of like what I call popcorn fantasy, where you read it and it just goes by in a couple hours. You're done, bam. It's like which it's fine. We need those just as much as we need anything, more serious minded. But this one just like it went really fast, and I was like, oh wow, 700 pages in a week. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But
yeah, you need a mix. You need a variety.
Oh, yeah.
And I think actually doing this, I always the bit I worry about is like I'm halfway through, say halfway through chapter 5, and I'm thinking, gonna be a short discussion this week, And then by the time you get to the end of the 3 chapter, you're like, oh my god, there's so much happened in this story. I don't understand how so much could have happened.
Oh, that reminds me. I had highlighted a couple of passages with a note that I didn't understand. I need to ask people what they got from this. I'm going to find those notes, but keep talking.
Oh, no pressure. Chippy pull you up.
Well, what was fascinating was when Lorenda attempted to pierce the defenses of Althane,
yes.
and I thought that was hilarious because who was the
Sethfir led the traps. She led the traps, yeah.
And it turns out that it was like all this big illusion that he was putting on, and then later on it's like, well, all you had to do was ask, if you wanted this.
Or do you want to come for a cup of tea or something? Something like that.
I thought that was hilarious. I was laughing. I was just like, okay, so this whole thing about the Waystone, all you had to do was ask.
I've been sitting here years thinking, yeah.
I think Asandi tells Ilera in the first book that all your what is that organization? What are they called? Order. All your order has to do is ask, and she's come up with this like huge army. And I love the description of the centaur. By the way, that was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, but it was this big illusion.
Well, I'm curious about that. He Sethfir refers to it as an illusion, but when we got him, before he departs, after he sends Caradmon on his way, he talks about making a bargain with the power in there. So I'm like, so how much of it was illusion, and how much of it was that the real the spirit of the being,
But wasn't it also sort of alluded to that if he hadn't set the illusion, then the all probably would have died anyway? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Such was the power. So
remarks like,
yeah,
it's good that and she would have her training had no way to, which is another kind of highlights. It's like how, despite their actions and how they can be annoyances to him, it's like you also when you see things from this fellowship's perspective, you realize the Coriani are so far out of their depth in dealing with these guys, and they have no idea, or seem to have no idea, at least.
But do you not think that's true of everybody in the series? Like the Fellowship, when they're dealing with the Mistwraith, etc., feel really out of their depth in certain ways of that, and everybody feels out of their depth, apart when it comes to being part of like Arathon's kind of scheme. And I think that's why he's so lovable to read, is that he seems to be able to have this bit of being able to read people so well, and use kind of the things that they can't or can do against them.
Yeah, it was one thing. We've seen. And Jenny's mentioned it too, how the Fellowship doesn't volunteer information, right?
Yeah.
And with Arathan's training as a sorcerer, kind of influences him the same way to not volunteer things, but he kind of does at times. But it's usually in the like with the scene I mentioned earlier where I connected the 2 bits. It's usually he'll volunteer some very small tidbit, but it's designed. His volunteering it is designed to prod that person. To try and prod that person into, looking at the issue themselves. Like indeed, only the cook doesn't think so, and that's just his little hook, to be where he could lead the car to go ask the cook and find out that Talus just being, putting on a big show.
Yeah, he does seem to be 2 steps ahead of everybody he runs into.
Also, this is because you mentioned this earlier with the word. I found a word today. A first time, in this the series where I did not know the word and I had to look it up. And it's another one. I'm like, did I just breeze past this word before? What does this word mean? Because I was looking at it and I'm like, is this a typo? On the Kindle? And so my worry was that I'm like, did they do something weird? Because there's a whole bunch of them. If you saw them all over Ships of Marior, like on the Kindle version, it's got some crazy weird typos in the Kindle version. And so I looked it up and I'm like, okay, no, this is an actual word. It's I think right around the scene where Dakar's it's in chapter 5 maybe, where Dakar is questioning Aerithon. It might be before he has the vision, or maybe it's after he has the vision. I don't remember. But they're at a campfire and he's discussing about what Aerithon's going to do, and it remarks about his tone, and it uses the word plangency. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I looked at it because it just looked weird to me, and I was like, is this an actual word?
Yeah.
Or did the Kindle version do something weird? And so I had to look it up, and I was like, and it's like referring to like a sad tone to your voice kind of thing.
I remember looking it up, but I forgot what it means. I found the passage, but I don't think I quite remember my question. So this is when Eldir is talking to, well, basically when they've summoned Arathon to ask him about the theft of the first batch of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this last bit where, I think it's one of the sorcerers explaining to Eldir, you can rein in your fuming and thank your creator for the favor of Arathon's resourcefulness. Else our peril before the Mistrate would be redoubled. There's no space left for diplomacy. Only force can prevail against the war host that's gathered in Shand. I didn't fully understand what that means. Are they saying that Arathon needs to go to war with Lyser so that to curb his war host, or is that referring to something else? I am looking at this on the Kindle, so I don't know what page number it is on the paperback. But it is chapter.
I remember
6,
the section, I tell you, because I just read it like an hour ago.
Yeah. Chapter 6.
Yeah, it is in 6, and it's before Dagon comes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's
because it comes up about the theft of the gold and all.
Yeah.
And I think it was more it was worry about the fact that the if the war host wasn't delayed, and by whatever means, Arathon's people in training and whatnot weren't ready to face them. And if they'd have been allowed to let the exchange for the ransom go through right then on the first try, then the war host would have gone through there and just ravaged everything in its path, because he wasn't ready for dealing with them.
Yeah. It's on page 308 if you want.
308, yeah, just found it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. I had a note about. I'm a Sethvir fangirl now, apparently, because he was sort of just gazing off into the distance when people were asking him about what he knew about this first batch of gold and who stole it. I think he was just pretending to be occupied elsewhere. That was really cool.
I'm a doddering old man, and I'm not going to answer your questions.
Yeah.
That passage to me just says that Eldir recognizes that actually Arathon has to be cunning You know, he's no other way to win this. He doesn't have troops. Like
Mm.
even for a few archers that are well trained or otherwise, he has to do something to prevail, or else they'll be left with him dead and the
Mm.
real fallout and the real problems that the world will have. That the curse basically is won at that stage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like at this point, you know, he's tried delaying it, like we saw at the end of Ships. You know, at this point, he has to break Lysair's Warhost.
Mm.
There's just no, like he says, I think in the conversation with Carol, where you know Cal's like, "We're going to win this time," and everything's just sort of like, "Yeah, but what does it matter if you know because if Lysair is and he are still alive, it's just going to happen again." But
Mm.
Yeah. It seems like a problem that doesn't really have a solution, if you know what I mean. Especially
Yeah.
because I keep coming back to the idea this is supposed to last like 500 years. You know what I mean? We're sort of in the infancy, 9 years or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
At this stage, I think I read.
yeah, we're somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're basically at the point of it has a solution, and it's one that Erethan has looked at and already rejected.
Hmm.
There was a line that I highlighted for discussion. It was, I forget at what point Lyser says this, but he says, "We have the numbers to expend." So Arathon is thinking carefully about every single person who might die, whether on his side or the other side. And Lyser is saying, "We have the numbers to expend." Like there's just a means to an end. None of them are individuals that he needs to care about, it seems like.
They're just cogs in the machine.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very telling line as well. I thought
Yeah.
this actually tells you the difference between how the two of them rule or inspire people or even see people. For all of
Yeah.
the things
Yeah.
that Lysair says about Arathon and how he treats children and all of that kind of stuff, he's willing to just sacrifice hundreds and thousands of lives in order to.
You won't find me parading in the public eye for an army.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because there's a measure of performance being put on by Lysair as far as his public persona goes, and early in chapter 4, like there's somebody's telling who is it? The captain is telling a tale of how Lysair, swept into the South Shire in a grand state, and the gems and the bullion braid and the prince's horse trappings and all that stuff. So there's this big awe in, into his
Pomp
presence.
and circumstance.
What's that?
Pomp and circumstance.
Yeah. There's a big amount of that attached to his retinue and his presence of his and him coming into places, and that plays into the the public view and psyche of what he is portraying, the Lord of Light, basically, and so he and we know he's not that way. Like you said, he's willing to expend lives, but his public persona is that performance of
Yeah.
being good on the good side,
Yeah, sweeps in, cracked troops, looks all shiny and bright,
Yeah.
and then it's like, oh look, it's the middle of the night, and I'm gonna light the sky up.
Yeah, and then that's contrasted with the actual performances that Arathon puts on when he plays the
Mm.
instrument in the court there, and he stole their hearts, and he bound them effortless as wind in haunting sweet resonance, like coins strewn down through a rainfall. I thought that was a beautiful line, and I was just like, and that's how Arathon's performance captures people in real time rather than the pomp and circumstance that Lysaia puts on. I thought that was a beautiful contrast between the characters, and I love how Janny did that.
Yeah, that was
Wonderful.
brilliant. I agree. The other thing that's interesting, the contrast between the two, is how Lyser puts on a brave face immediately, even to Karadmon, right? Like he does not give himself a moment to absorb the news. When he's told that Talit has been abducted, he goes immediately to, okay, now I just have to pretend she never existed and move on in life. And then that theme continues. He doesn't allow himself to express anything when when he finally meets her, and basically be vulnerable, versus how we see Arathon react when he finds out that Durkin is dead, right? Um, he's so willingly showing emotion. I maybe because of losing self-control, perhaps, um, to the loss of someone who he's interacted with but is not super close to, perhaps. But on the other hand, Lysaid is really closing himself off from expressing anything because he feels he needs to put on a face, um, even in the face of such a terrible thing happening to him. That I thought was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to the point where at the end of chapter 6, he's basically estranged from his wife
Yeah.
because he's
Mhm.
accusing her of being bewitched, and that was an interesting, ironic turn of events after he went through all this trouble to get her back.
Yeah.
And now he walks out on her.
Yeah.
But I think it was interesting how both Arathon and Lysa treated Talith in the event of it. You know, it was almost like her captivity was a shun against Lysa's leaderships, and that's why he had to pay for it back, even though he does refer to the fact that he's really missed her, etc. But when she comes back, he doesn't embrace her in the way, or he doesn't, you know, her spirit, you know, and the person that she is. And at the same kind of virtue, Arathon, the way he walks and makes sure she's treated regally and treated with respect, even when he's handing her back over. I think a lot of that plays into, you know, how they see Talith and actually what Talith's perception then is of the two men and their supposed virtues.
Mm.
Well, I
Yeah.
was waiting for that reunion because I was just like, if she said, I just knew it. I knew it. If she says one thing in favor of Arathon, it's not going
Yeah.
to be good, you know?
And she
And they
says more
do,
than one, obviously.
yeah, and they do sort of foreshadow it when Caradmon shows up
Mm.
and informs them, and he just immediately jumps to, well, there's a solicited wife that's been stolen, another solicited wife stolen by a Cephalan pirate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
right.
Immediately is just like, oh yeah, no, he's just gonna go up and because he's constructed that whole facade that
His mother was,
Aerothin is
yeah.
the product of rape, and
Yep.
because all the Cephalan are bad or whatnot. So he's just like, yeah, no,
Another one of the really interesting parts that I liked about it was kind of the examination of Talith's female gaze towards Arathon when they first meet.
Mm.
You know, and it happens a couple of times when he reappears in the boat, etc. as well. And it's just like it's never done in a longing way or a romantic way, but just observing him and the kind of things that she notices about him in terms of not just his build and his appearance, but how he interacts with people and how people interact with him and all that whole, you know, the whole way that the female views the male, you know,
Mm.
broadly that are. And Arthur even points it out. Isn't it to her where he says, "Remember that we're half brothers and not just by story or whatever it is. We're actually related. You know, we actually are of the same blood. We're not as
Yeah.
different as you would be told."
Mm.
That's true.
Yeah, I did like seeing Arathon from Talith's point of view. It it was a very neutral gaze, right? For
Yeah.
like, it's similar to Dakar in the sense that she's trying to find reasons to dislike him, but sort of falling short, and she doesn't have anything to say, oh yes, my husband's justified to hate him so much. But yeah, for all that, for being from the enemy camp, it was a very neutral gaze with which she looked at Arathon.
I think there's only one point where she talks about how the men look at him and how he fills out his shirt
Mm.
as being the only time that it kind of ventures towards like looking at his physical stature and his builds as being impressive rather than. But she kind of says that that's what the men are responding to rather than her, even though she's observing it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, where like the men look at him like, oh, he's a short little dude, short, slender little dude, and the women are like, being a little more discerning, and they're like, no, there's some muscle there.
Yeah.
But like also the scene with the horseman from Erlian's, camp where the dude's like, oh look, because Erethan looks super delicate, and he's like, my brother could circle your wrist with one hand, and Erethan's like, your brother's not here. Why don't you demonstrate? They're just like, the dude completely underestimates it.
Yeah. I love all instances of people underestimate Arathon and then are proved horribly wrong.
Other thing we haven't talked about at all is the two twins.
Oh, yes.
Two twins. The twins, sorry. Phelan and Fjark, and how their personalities have really come from just being these kids to having grown and kind of want control of their own lives, and ultimately how Tharic has to give in to the sort of steely and persistent nature of Phelan.
Yeah.
Tharic was interesting because he's kind of he switched sides and swore to Arathon, and now he's kind of like, you know what, I'm gonna swear myself to Janess, and the hell with those two guys. Kind of,
Yeah. The kids felt really grown up in this book. We started with them as like this fun, silly people, and in 1 year they've grown so much. You really see them grow into themselves. I love that.
I think it's been more than a year though.
Almost 4, right?
Yeah,
2,
it's like they were like
4.
They were like 8 or 9, 7 or 8. Around was the impression I got when he first came to Marior, and they're like 12 now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think his time
He's
in the
been a
mountain.
while at Marior without, being discovered.
Yeah.
Because no one until the Coriani gave away his position, Lazaire had no idea where he was.
Right.
Just that he was out abroad.
Yeah, because I remember seeing 9 years somewhere.
Okay, that makes sense.
And it was 5 years at the beginning of ships. So they were,
and it was
like
pretty...
you said, so I think it's been about 4 years since you first met them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 4 years. Okay, that makes more sense. 1 year felt like, enough, but not enough. But 4 years, they've become these sort of mature, borderline adolescent kids that know what they want.
And I think narratively and storytelling wise, I think a lot of it was to play into, again, Talis' observances when she goes to relay to Lysair when he says, but Arathon abducted those kids, and Talis was able to turn around and say, but I think there's some truth in the fact that the mother would have just held those kids to the apron for all of their lives and never let them experience life. I mean, there's some truthfulness in that, and of course Lysair doesn't want to hear it.
Yeah. So there's like, oh no, he manipulates kids, blah blah blah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
She's making her musings, and you have the bit where she doesn't realize that he's just sort of staring at her like, like he's not even listening to her, what she's saying. He's just like, no. And then he immediately jumps to, he's bewitched you. And she's like, no, he hasn't.
What's an explanation I can latch on to so I don't have to listen to this?
But Talis' place going forward, I think, is sort of fascinating, because if she is estranged, which is obviously the impression that we get, her role and her power, now that she knows both, actually within the story, is growing sort of exponentially, and obviously the fact that she's the queen, and obviously that position holds power and sway in the world. So, yeah. And again, another example of, here's 3 chapters where you took a character that's sort of been in the background and had bits part, and all of a sudden has become, oh god, I can't wait to the next chapter that Talis appears, because this is such an incredibly interesting character now.
Yeah.
Well, see more in the next book.
Yes.
So one more, are we okay to change topics, or okay? So Lysair is sort of making justifications because he's entangled by the Mistrate into thinking that he needs to kill Arathon. Okay, so he makes a big deal out of the fact that Arathon killed 7 people in Alistron and caused destruction in Jailot, but didn't really kill anyone, I don't think. But the number of people that they killed in the war, and okay, let's say Talcorin is wrong on both sides, but since then they just like brutally murdered Durkin for no reason other than revenge, apparently, like they pointed out. Lyser doesn't see that. Sure, he's twisted, but Diagon is also letting himself believe this narrative of, oh, they hurt us far more, when in fact the hurt that they brought upon the world is so much more. That, yeah, I think that's really interesting that they keep latching on to that 7 and Jailot when those weren't even intentional. They didn't know that, but that's a very small number compared to the actual damage that these others have done.
Yeah,
Is
but his
it's
cause
not
is
such-
righteous.
I was gonna say, this is the reporting of war, though, isn't it? You can even go to modern day reporting of wars. When we go to see foreign wars held by our troops overseas, we don't hear about the atrocities that are committed by our troops.
Yeah.
Or anything. We hear about the terrible things that are said, and that kind of gets passed back and forward. The whole idea that history is written by the victors, and that's the only side of the story you shall ever be told. And I think a lot of that seed and a lot of those stories that you're hearing is very much a perpetuation of all of that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Janny's very aware of that, and she's giving us that perspective when she wants to, when we need it, as a reader. It's very well done.
Yeah. Yep.
But yes, another really interesting passage and look at people's justifications for their actions. And I think a lot of what happens in the interplay within characters actually is about that, of sort of manipulating and asking the questions of the reader of, are our characters always in the right, or are our characters sort of a grey in the middle here, or were they just right, or were they not? I think we've been played with a little bit.
Yeah.
Even at the end of chapter 6 in the little news blurb there, you have the mayors and the ministers gathering, and they're actually making that document to make Lysair the High King.
That's right. Yeah.
Underwritten by the towns, so all these people are on his side still. They're still tied up into his righteous cause, and it's really a might makes right situation. And so that wasn't good news at the end of that chapter 6 there, because now he's going to have even more power.
That's right.
And who knows what new atrocity is going to come of this stuff. Chibipo does, but he's not going to tell us.
But you get again another sort of subtext of like anti-monarchy, anti kind of giving one person too much power message. At the end of the day, we can see the cracks and how much of a problem it's been so far, but yet people are doubling down, and he's going to get more and more and more to the point that the war's kind of pointless at this stage. It's a witch hunt for one person. He already rules the world in a lot of ways, which is sort of what Talith was sending.
And Talith speaking sense, it's, he's been running away constantly. If he comes back to bother you by building his own warhost, then you go to war. It's all the lives that he's costing. He's not thinking about that.
Unbelievable.
I will be very curious for everyone's reaction over the next few chapters, and how Lysair responds to the things that happen, there, and especially we won't see all of his response in this book, but with the early chapters of Fugitive Prince, how the fallout of what happens here.
Yeah. So
At the end of every book, you have to buckle up a little bit, right? In the series.
Yeah.
All I can say is, since we're about to go into arc 3, once we finish this one, and I think Steve sort of said it, buckle up, because it's about, you thought, this book kind of barreled along. It's about to it's like you're about to go over the top of the roller coaster. You know, it's reached the top. It's about to go downhill.
That part, you people. I'm not the dude looks cool in the photo, you know, with his hands up at just the right opportune time. I'm the guy that people look at going, look at that guy's face.
Be off here.
If I hadn't signed up for 200 other things, I would have said, let's meet next week to discuss this.
How's Wednesday for you? Yeah.
So one sort of side subject that I wanted to bring up for discussion, it's not super important, but I really like Arathon and I love pretty much everything about his character, but there were a couple of instances in these 3 chapters where I felt like I don't think I'm gonna like hanging out with Arathon sometimes. So it's those instances where we are told that he's using invective to get his people to do work, or using strong words to get them to not slack off, or whatever. There is one counteracting point in that he also works as hard as all the people he's making to do work. But then, like, I asked myself, would I like Arathon for a coworker or a boss? And I feel like I'm like, no.
Yeah, he's very much extremely harsh. You know, he's fair, but he's very harsh.
Yeah, I said that earlier. He's a harsh taskmaster.
No slacking off here.
Yeah.
You know,
Is that it's interesting that that's the case, given that he has an inborn inclination towards compassion. I'm trying to figure out how those two work together. What
Does that mean
do you have?
compassion? Does compassionate people not work hard? They can. Compassionate, the two things aren't the same. I know what you're saying, that they wouldn't give people a hard time, but ultimately, I think Arathon's inspiring people to be the best that they can be.
It's kind of what it is. Like like Lysair, he reads people really well, and he's just kind of driving them to be the best they can be. You know, he wants them to be as, you know, stand on their own. Like with, I think Dakar remarks on it at some point where people who associate with Arathon do so, you know, freely, you know, with understanding what the stakes are in the situation and everything, you know, versus, you know, Lysair is like, I have all these hanger-ons, you know, sycophants basically. And, you know, Arathon just is like, you know, you give your all, and, you know, I will too, and let's get this done. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go back to the episode with Janice. Remember, he basically kidnaps her and throws her over his shoulder in sort of a heavy-handed manner, but ultimately because she's living her life in fear, and, you know, it's not much of a life. You know, he's trying to shake her out of it. You know.
Yeah,
he's just doesn't hesitate to do mean things to make people be better. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. You gotta wonder if any of that will backfire on him at some point, because he does make those rash decisions every once in a while to do what he thinks is best for the person he's doing it for. But what if kidnapping Janess didn't work out quite so well, you know?
Or just, you know, he does that, you know, his typical, you know, I'm going to do this because I know best for somebody, and they don't, you know, they don't take it as well.
Yeah.
You know, because he is kind of high-handed at times. He's just like, yeah, I'm going to do this because I know better.
Yeah. I suppose it's compassion in the sense of like how parents scold their children to do what's best for them. Sometimes maybe that's how I need to look at it, because it really got my back up reading all those descriptions of Arathon scolding the people who are working for him. I'm like, that's hitting a little close to home.
I think it would, you know, maybe play a little bit into what I mentioned before with him being a initiate sorcerer, the way the fellowship is, and, you know, he's got a lot more, you know, he's got the added benefit of that insight into people, but he's not as he's not like the fellowship where whatever their priority is completely separate from, you know, humankind and whatnot. You know, his priorities are these people around him. He has to live there with them, and um, so he's not going, oh, it's like, oh well, I'm just gonna not bother with them. It's like, no, I'm going to prod these people to give their all and start thinking for themselves and whatnot. Whereas the Fellowship doesn't, it's like they'll answer questions if you ask them, like Jenny said, but they don't really do as much volunteering, in the same way Erethan does, I think.
Yeah. And it seems they are very judgment-free in volunteering. They didn't say bad Arathon, no kidnapping princesses. They're like, yeah, cool, we'll help you negotiate the ransom.
Yeah. Were they helping him negotiate because he asked them to, or because there was something else behind their motive for helping that negotiation? Were they trying to prevent some kind of disaster or something like that?
It was just mostly to, keep Erethan and Lysair from just like, it's like, oh look, here's Ostermere. It sure was a nice city. Too bad it's gone. It's like, it's a nice crater now, and everyone's dead except these two brothers. We don't want that.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think we're good.
Yeah. Anything else that anyone wants to bring up for discussion?
I can finally finish this book off now.
Yes.
I'm a chapter or two ahead, but I've just been leaving it and just kind of going over, 4, 5, and 6, in case I missed anything. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get back to where I was.
Yeah.
You're halfway through Fugitive Prince, aren't you?
No, I haven't started Fugitive Prince again. No.
Okay. Steve, I have a question. Sorry, go ahead, Chibipa.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, Steve, I have a question for you before we go. Since we haven't seen you in a while, what was your favorite section in the last few chapters that we've read?
Ooh, that's a good one. I've been enjoying Dakar. He's always been an annoyance to me, but he's growing on me. So his portions I've been enjoying quite a bit.
Yeah.
I still don't like him yet.
I really didn't like him. It's one of those where I just really didn't like him, and
yeah,
I just always wondered what. But yeah, he's growing on me.
Yeah, he's growing on me for sure. I'm still ambivalent, like Chris said, but he's growing on me. I could see myself liking him in a bit, if as long as he doesn't let Arathon take the arrow. Oh no!
Just give the poor guy a drink.
evil laughter is not boding well.
This is not helping. Right, wrap it up. Then we'll get going.
All right, let's do outros, I guess. Chibi-Po, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Well, I'm Chibi-Po. I can be found on Twitter or whatever it's called now. No, I'm still going to call it Twitter. I'm sorry. Whatever that new name is, it's stupid. So it's still Twitter. And at Chibi-Po1, and also I have my Impair YouTube channel, Chibi-Po's Library, but there's nothing there. So you can go there if you want, but you won't find anything. And I am also around on Page Chewing and also on Goodreads with helping out with a buddy read for people who are first starting out on Curse of the Mist Wraith. So
I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that recently.
Jared?
My next, okay. I'm at the Fantasy Thinker on YouTube, and it's also my handle for Instagram, and I'm on the Page Chewing forum all the time, and I'm doing a blog on there too, on pagechewing.com, and looking forward to more of this stuff and a whole bunch of other stuff too.
One thing you don't have to worry about is being busy.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Especially the Varsha around. She's
Yeah, she keeps us busy.
She's like Arathon. She's compassionate, but she's a hard taskmaster. Right? And that's
No. I was happy about that comparison for half a second before you got to the taskmaster part.
Sorry, Steve.
It's great. Serious fun.
Good stuff. I'm Steve. You can find me at pagechewing.com or on the forums, and always have something going on. Lots of buddy reads happening as usual. So thanks for really happy to be here, and glad I was able to catch up. Thanks for holding off a little bit for me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. My name is Chris Mullen. I have a YouTube channel called Chris Mullen, where I talk about movies, I talk about books, and of course we're doing this really long. We're doing Legend, middle of the month. If anybody doesn't know, gonna get talking about Legend. Very excited for those SF Masterworks series. The first one was so much fun, and it's another spoiler, great book for the second one. And yeah, so if you don't know about those, head over to pagestream.com and you'll find all the details on how to join in and chat about great books.
Yeah. Cool. And my name is Varsha. You can find me on my channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain, or on Page Chewing, where I'm bullying people into reading with me, apparently. But yes, like Chris said, we're going to be reading I Am Legend in a couple of weeks.
That's funny.
So come check us out there for those and many other buddy reads. Thank you so much for listening to us enjoy this discussion about Warhost of Vastmark.